Okay, let's compress our slab. Changing directions, compression in multiple directions. I'm going to compress this edge here. It starts to dry out first. Then I want to lift this corner. So see how the corner raises when I lift it and it stays? That's because clay has memory, but that's also the level of dryness that I have in this particular slab. So it is now showing us that it's ready to be worked with, and it'll hold shape. And this texture here is from the fabric from the rolling mill. And I'm going to compress on a diagonal this way and change course this direction. Now, if you're really struggling with your slab, you can squirt it with water. I'm not going to, because it's going to soften everything up and I'm going to lose the perfect level of dryness that I've got going on right now. But if you see a lot of drag, you can do that for your slab at home. Now, when I make a mug with a pretty heavy texture on it, I personally like to have a nice smooth rim for where I'm going to have the recipient use their lip on it, because if you leave that texture on that rim, it's going to be kind of uncomfortable. So this one's for one of my kids. I'm going to use my handy dandy little rolling pin, and you'll notice that made my slab warp, so I have not cut my template yet. And I didn't go all the way off my edge. I left that rim nice, neat, and smooth. So then my goal for a mug is a minimum of 9 inches long and a minimum of 4 inches deep. Closer to 4.5 is fine. So when I'm using the fettling knife, you want to use your fettling knife when you're cutting straight lines. Your pin tool is for when you're using curved lines. I like to work on a corner like this so I can move my body to be more ergonomic, and I like to drag the knife towards myself. So I'm using a yardstick right now because we're still feeling out the pattern on this particular rolling pin. But if I know the angle and everything that I'm looking for, I'll make a template once I know exactly the preferred size that I need a mug to be. So this mug here is a little bit shorter at 4 inches, and then I believe this is actually 12 inches long. So that's how you know that it's going to be a 3 3/4 circle around. And you don't really know that exactly because the thickness of your clay and the shrinkage is going to be like 10 to 12%. You have to actually test to determine what those sizes of your slab is going to equate to later on after it's fired. All right, so now I'm going to cut vertical again. And I'm going to pull that knife towards me. So I ran my rolling pin 2 times and I cut down my slab, and it looks like 2 passes of this particular pattern puts me at 11 1/4. And then my height is still yet to be determined. I'm at 5 inches high right now, so I've got plenty of room to play. If I want that to be a true 4.5, I'm gonna come from here. Oh yeah. And I need to trim about a 1/2 inch off the bottom here. Your mug can be as big as you need it to be. If you need a big honkin' stein, you make a big honkin' stein. But the person I'm making this for is little, and once you add all that hot cocoa to it, it actually gets kind of heavy to lift. So you know what you are looking for in a mug. If you need a big mug, you make it big. You don't trim this edge off, okay? But I am gonna keep that because I think the characters still look really cute. And that might be a nice decorative piece for later on. So that sponge is a little bit damp, but it's not over the top. If that sponge is too wet, the clay will actually melt right into a puddle. So you don't want to do that. It's a big mess, and then you have to clean it up. Don't do that to yourself. All right, so I've got this little point here. All right, I am at 11 1/4 and 4 1/4. Now I'm going to bevel these edges. I'm going to use my thumb on this corner and pull towards myself. They make a really cool tool called a beveler by Zyam. It's awesome. And I have one, but it needs to be tightened right now. All right. So now I'm going to very gently, see how this is coming up? Very gently move this guy. I want to get that into a circle. Just about as soon as it's stiff enough to go into one. All right, see how these bevels are gonna fold over each other? You don't have to do that. However, what happens is the more clay that can make that connection, the stronger the connection will be. So my goal for this slab is to make a bottom for my cup as well as a handle. So I rolled it out on the rolling mill. So now I need to give it that same treatment. We're gonna flip this guy over. We want to compress and change directions as we're working on it. I only want to have texture for the bottom, but not necessarily for my handle. So what I'm going to do is gently turn this guy towards me, let this bottom set up for a minute. I have a handy dandy scoring tool like this. Looks like a little baby fork. I'm gonna score in X's and T's. All right. Score, making X's. And T's. All right, then you want to use slip for strong joints and connections. Not everybody does, but that's how I was taught, and I've had great success with it. All right, now I want to come together here and compress and make a strong joint. So I'm coming from the outside and the inside simultaneously. I've got my hand inside there. Now I have a mess inside. There should be a lot of slip in there, right? So I'm going to use the handle of this knife and come up the inside of that seam and compress that right into my hand. Now I'm going to flip over my cup, get that hair out of there, and see how this joint is still pulled apart right here at the bottom. I'm going to reach in there and score a little bit more. And I'm going to compress that edge and clean that up. Alright, so I'm going to use a pin tool because now I'm going to cut that bottom out to fit my cut. So I'm going to hold this guy in place. I want to cut as straight up and down as I possibly can. And I'm giving myself like a millimeter of room. Okay, maybe a millimeter or 3. Alright, so now I'm going to flip this guy over. Again, I'm going to score the bottom of this cup. So this is my bottom. And I'm actually just going to pat this guy around a little bit. I want this rim here to be a little fine, a little bit thin. There we are. I'm going to gently press this guy into the bottom of the wall, just enough to get an impression. There we are. Now I know where I need to score because I'm following the markings that were made by that impression. Alright, and we want to add a little bit of slip into our connection point here, making a strong joint. And we're also going to slip the other side. So I'm going to walk around that edge, compress as I go. All right, now I'm going to start to round that edge over. When I'm making a slab built mug, it doesn't have the same type of foot as a wheel thrown piece. So I'm actually going to compress this.
Don't worry, it's not this.
Okay, so the job of the foot is to prevent glaze from running off your pot and ending up on your kiln shelf. So I still have this handy dandy little foot, even though this is a slab built mug and not something that's trimmed off the wheel. So it's okay if it has this little ridge right here, because that'll be a place for my glaze to stop. So I have a soft, wet sponge. It's really thin. This one is made by Mud Tools. And what I want to do is shape this mug. So see how this guy has a nice little bowed out belly here. We still want to have a nice sweet shape to our cup. It doesn't have to look like a tin can. I'm gonna collar my cup here using this sponge. I'm gonna bow it out. And I want to collar here because I don't want it to bow out the whole way. I just want to create that sweet little shape. So I'm going to turn. So I'm going this way around and this way up from the bottom. So I'm making those two motions. And I'm aware of my seam. I'm kind of skipping the seam or leaving it for last, giving that joint a chance to come together. When I do bow out the joint, I almost always blow it open and I have to reseal it. So then I'm going to come up here. All right, see? There's my seam. I totally blew that guy right out. So it's okay if that happens in your own studio. You just put it back together. If you think you now need a little bit more slip in that soft spot that happened, you're going to come in from the inside. Right there. Alright. So the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to spray my hand. So that way I'm not adding too much water to the clay. And now I'm going to gently alter my lip. I'm going to come around with this sponge. I just want to soften any cut edges. I don't want it to feel totally squared off. Alright, now in the bottom of my cup, do you see the slip inside that wall where we made our connection? That's real easy to clean up and it makes your cup look really nice. So there's two different tools that you can use. So there's this guy. This is like a rubber paintbrush is what they call it. Really, it's like one of my favorite clay tools on earth. And then this is a scrubby little 99-cent paintbrush. And I'll show you both of them. So I take a little bit of water, I spray it right onto my drywall board, and then I roll this paintbrush in there, soften it back up again. And I'm going to go ahead and wipe that into my sponge so I get it wet, soften it up. But then I like that scrubby little weirdo shape, right? We artists don't throw anything out. So this brush isn't good for watercolor anymore, but it sure is fun in the studio. And I'm going to go ahead and soften that seam all the way around, and that's with the paintbrush. Now I'm going to come in with this fancy guy, and I'm going to come around, same idea, compress those edges a little bit, get rid of that slip, and clean it up. I actually am going back to my scrubby little brush. And then if I think my clay is moving, I'm going to support that with my thumb here. Alright, so right now you could be done. This would be considered a tumbler. There were many, many moons when I thought handles were mean and I left at a tumbler. But handles are not as big and scary as I once thought they were. I'm going to use my straight edge again. So the funny thing about handles, my little studio elf took my knives on at the pin tool. Funny thing about handles is it's just like going dress shopping. So dresses are always displayed in the most beautiful way imaginable. They look fantastic on the shelf, hanging in the window, and then you try them on and they don't look like that on you. Handles do that. Handles look beautiful when they're sitting on the mat. They look lovely. They're displayed nice and to their best advantage. But the problem is, they don't always look cute on your mug. So I'm going to make an inch one, and then I would say this is a 1/2 to a 3/4, and I like using a fussy little, what do you call this, cookie cutter to soften up that edge, make it look more finished, and that way your handle will have that polished, finished look as well. So clay has memory, and we don't want it to remember being flat. We want it to remember having that cute handle shape. So I'm going to go ahead and take this guy, make an impression into my board. I'm going to take this guy and make an impression into my board. And I'll give that a few minutes to dry up a little bit and get a little bit stiffened up. Okay, so I've had these handles set up for about 5 minutes. See these cut edges where they have kind of a pilled rise? I'm going to come in here and soften that, because when you're putting your hand under the handle, you want that to be ergonomic and feel good in your hand. So I'm going to go ahead and polish this up. You could use a rib. I'm just using a little spongy. The other trick that I do is I use that handle again as a tiny little rolling pin, and I'm just going to roll in to the edges of that handle. It's going to make it expand just a little bit, and anytime you can get more material to make your connection, the stronger your attachments are going to be. So now I'm looking for my seam on this mug. And now we try on the dress. Do we like this one? Is it too thick for this piece? Is it too long? We can always shorten and edit. How about this one? Is that too skinny? It's definitely too long. So I'll go ahead and come in here with my cookie cutter, cut another 1/2 inch or so off. I could do that again. It's always better to leave too much than to be sad that you can only fit one little finger in your teacup handle. So if I were to go with this one, this is the length I would want. Then I test. I want to make sure I get 2 or 3 fingers in here. And then where's that pinky rest? This is probably more thought than you've ever put into a handle in your life. But you want it to be comfortable. You want it to be strong enough and large enough to feel like it will support the weight of your mug with the water inside. So you want to think about all of these things. I'm sure tomorrow when you use your favorite mug, you'll be like, I wonder if I really like this handle. Is this really the handle of my dreams? Alright, so I'm going to come in, since I've edited all the squished off part, I'm going to just thin that out just a little bit. I'm going to use my little guy here. Scored the wrong side, score. The other thing that you might want to do to try on your handle is you put a little bit of slip on here. Then when you pull that slip off, you know where you're going to score on the pot, so you don't just score the whole wall of your pot. Alright, so through the magic of television, I went back to the other handle. I'm going to add my slip here to both of these connection points. Now I'm going to add this guy in here. I want to round that out because my cup is round. I want it to hug the surface of the cup and get as much surface as I can in that connection. Alright. Clean up those joints, so I will slip inside this joint here and make sure that's a strong connection point. Got a little clay booger there. Soften the bottom. I'm going to clean up those joints. I want to get into the groove here. We are just about done. I'm going to come around these edges here and make sure that's a nice strong compression. Alrighty guys. And now you've got a sweet little mug. So I don't want anybody to pick it up by the handle until after it's been glaze fired, because all you want to do is hold this handle, right? That's our instinct as humans. But if you were to hold this handle and your pot fell to the floor and broke into a million pieces, you and I both might cry. Okay? All right, so I think that is good to go. Have a great day.